All right, let's get started. I wanted to welcome everyone here to our YardSmart shade plants. My name is Monica Ciplian. I'm a volunteer with the Calgary Horticultural Society. This YardSmart series is offered in partnership with the City of Calgary. But before we get started, I'd like to share with you the Society's land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge the enduring and active relationship of Indigenous people with this land, specifically the area in which we inhabit today, also known as the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7. The Society as an organization is focused on the well-being of the land, and we endeavor to honor Indigenous, Inuit, and Métis rights and relationships with the land, and the ability for all to grow, live, work, and play within this territory. A little bit about the Horticultural Society. We are a registered charitable nonprofit organization celebrating 118 years of cultivating Calgary's gardening community. Our mission is to encourage the gardening and for the enhancement of our environment and quality of life. And one way we do this is through sessions like this one. I just wanted to introduce our instructor today. Her name is Verne Williams. Verne was raised on a farm with gardening parents, and she literally grew up gardening. Verne left the farm to study fine arts and then history, and she spent the first part of her career in the corporate world, but about 10 years ago escaped and took the master gardening program and entered into the horticultural business with her own gardening company. Welcome, Verne.
Thank
Okay.
you, Monica. So thank you everybody for joining us today. It is the perfect day to do a little bit of garden dreaming because it's kind of ugly out there, but hey, it's moisture, right? We're gonna keep telling ourselves it's moisture. So I was telling Monica earlier, when I was much younger, I was all about the sun garden and all the flowers and everything. That's what my focus was. And then about 26 years ago, I purchased a home in Calgary and I had a great deal of shade. And I really started to fall in love with shade plants and the the atmosphere that a shade garden provides. And now I've bought a new property and I have a very wide open backyard with no shade. So I'm currently mapping out where I'm going to plant all my trees so I can go back into my shade. So let's get going on our shade. Now, first of all, we need to define shade because it's a bit of a loosey-goosey topic. There's a lot of great areas here, no pun intended. Part shade is 4+ hours of sun. Now, that doesn't have to be consecutive. It can be a couple hours in the morning, a couple hours in the afternoon, an hour here, there, as long as you add up to about 4 hours. And then shade, we actually consider that about 2 hours of sun. So maybe it gets a little bit of light in the morning and then a little bit of light in the evening. We would consider that to be shade. Deep shade basically receives less than 1 hour of sun. Okay, you really aren't getting very much light. Think of a deep forest, heavy canopy over top, deep shade. And then there's dappled shade. Dappled shade is what you get planted under deciduous trees. This is a shade that is constantly moving, so there is some light coming through at all times, and it's moving around on the plant because the sun is moving through the leaves. So those are our four different definitions of shade. So let's jump right into it. Who does well living in part shade? Well, the queen of the prairie is a magnificent plant to put into part shade. These big, beautiful, kind of pinky lilac candy floss flowers really pop out. And we've got a nice, interesting foliage with the lobed leaves. That always adds a bit to the garden. Now, Jacob's ladder, very popular in the garden. This is actually a native plant. And one thing I do love about Jacob's Ladder is it blooms very early in the summer, sort of a late spring, early summer bloomer. Beautiful periwinkle flowers, also can come in white, but its foliage is very fern-like. And in fact, one of its nicknames is a Japanese fern, but obviously it's not a fern. But you can look at its foliage there and you can see it's got this beautiful foliage. So when it's done blooming, you still get a really nice foliage off this plant. The columbine, that is an absolute favorite in a shade garden. They are a beautiful plant. We do have the hybrids, and then we do have a native. This is the Rocky Mountain columbine. This native is actually quite short. Now we do have blue, yellow, and red in the natives that can be taller. This is one is my particular favorite, the Rocky Mountain there, because it is a cute short little one and it kind of fills in nicely under plants. Red birds in a tree is a little bit deceiving. It's not a tree. It's actually a herbaceous perennial. So it's going to die to the ground every fall and come from the ground every spring. But it does resemble in many ways a bit of a shrub. It can be a taller plant, getting around 3 to 4 feet tall, but it gives these beautiful blooms on tall spikes that look like little red cardinals. It's one of my favorites. This plant is also extremely good at being drought tolerant once it's established. Underline the once it's established. But it makes a wonderful plant at the back of a border or something that really pops up, and those dramatic little red birds are just too cute. Another native is the lady slipper orchid. We will find this growing around Alberta. Please don't dig it up when you see it is protected, but it is for sale. You can find it in garden centers. It's a beautiful orchid. They come out early in the spring, these little yellow orchid slippers, and then it's got this great foliage that comes in. It's a really nice plant. The tried and true hosta. You knew I was going to have a hosta in here if I was going to be talking about shade plants. We love our hostas. They grow very well for us. There is a couple of things I will point out. You will notice in this picture here, and pretty much every hosta you're going to find for sale in the garden scent are what we called ribbed leaves. Now, if you find an older hosta and it's very smooth, that was how hostas were. We actually started breeding towards the ribbed leaf because slugs don't particularly care as much for the ribs as they did the smooth. Slugs on smooth leaf hostas was devastating, but there were some very beautiful varieties, so if you do happen to find one, don't steer away from it. Also, hostas are late. They like to come up in the spring when they're very certain there's going to be no more freak snowstorms or, that they know summer's coming on. So don't look for them early in the spring. They do come later. I say they're kind of teenagers. They sleep a bit late. This is also a native plant. This is a native vine. It is the wild cucumber vine. This is actually an annual. It comes from seed every spring and grows at a phenomenal rate. I swear you can go out and measure it. As you can see here in this picture, it just takes right off. And what it will do is it will seed itself back for next spring. You do have to be a bit cautious with this because as a self-seeder, you will not notice it starting to come up all over the place. This was at my place, and what I used to do with it, I used to just cut off most of the little fruit it makes after it's done flowering, the little round balls. I just cut them off before the seeds mature, so I only have a little bit of seeding, so I stayed it in control. But if you're looking for a fast-growing vine, the wild cucumber definitely is it. It's got a lovely little white flower to it also. The spotted cranesbill geranium is a native geranium to our area. It grows very well in our gardens, but a lot of us like to get into some of the hybrids. There are so many beautiful hybrids on the market for these cranesbill, and they're all so very hardy in our climate and do quite well in the shade. You can get into the colored foliage. There's so many. This one I particularly recommend for growing around spruce trees, as it is the most tolerant of the conditions. This is not a native. The big root cranesbill is actually from Northern Europe, but it is most tolerant around spruce trees, and it will fill in to make a nice ground cover. One of my favorites is the lady's mantle. It has absolutely got these wonderful little bright chartreuse flowers, these beautiful leaves. The way it captures rain and holds it like little jewels. This was the plant that inspired the design of the Crystal Palace in London with the exhibition. If you look at the structure of these leaves, I just find this one truly beautiful. And I do love the flowers. They are minute in a way, but they're so charming. This is lungwort, an unfortunate name for a beautiful plant. It has these beautiful little flowers that come up. They come up bright blue, and as they age, they go to pink. But I do love how people are always quite startled to see a pink and blue flower on the same stalk. So it's kind of fun. You get the best of both worlds. The lungworts are known for having great foliage also. These are different lungworts planted together here. You can see the different white and spotted patterns going on here. Really do pick up in a shady area if you can get texture and some whites going on. These are just an incredible plant. If you leave these be, they will fill out and really take in a spot. Foam flowers are beautiful. I love the mass planting here you see on my right. This photo was taken out at Springbank, you know, to the west side of it, getting closer to the mountains, so a little bit of a harder zone perhaps than some of us in Calgary have. And as you can see, it does very well. It fills in. It's absolutely a beautiful flower. Again, part shade. A good old standby is always going to be goat's beard. When people used to ask me what shrub they could use in an area that was shady, I would tell them that shrubs need at least 4 hours of light. But a goat's beard, although technically needing 4 hours of light to do its best, will still do well in 3 hours, even sometimes 2 hours. It is just a super tough plant. Normally, it's a very large plant, gets around 4 to 5 feet tall, though there are varieties that can get larger. But there are also dwarf varieties that I just find so sweet that are like 12 to 18 inches tall. So it's a wonderful plant for those nice shady areas. And then that white foam flower on top really pops. You know, when you got darker areas, you want things to pop. Good old Joe Pye. Lois Hole did try to get a campaign to get weed out of its name, but so far we haven't succeeded. So I'll go with convention and call him Joe Pye weed. He is a beautiful, this is a native. He's gorgeous. He has a tendency to be a native more eastern in Canada than the west so much. He's more to the east. But you really can't find a more beautiful plant. Those dark purple stems, those bright green leaves, and then that beautiful mid-purple flowering. Also, Joe flowers quite late in the season, so when everyone else is kind of, finishing up and you're running out of blooms in your garden, here comes Joe. He's going to give you a beautiful display, kind of send you off on your way into winter with one last hurrah. So I really do love Joe for that. Catmint does very well in part shade. Catmint is also something that can be very drought tolerant once established. And it is a plant that will keep blooming all summer long. Catmint is tough. Now this is a plant you may want to keep contained because it can have bad habits of spreading, though some of the newer hybrids are a little better at it, so just read up on it. Cat's pajamas, I believe, is pretty good. I grew this for my cat. She absolutely adored it. And she was so hard on it. You would walk by and there'd be pieces of plant flying through the air as she would be frolicking in the middle, just raking it to pieces. And the next day it would pop back up. It was so incredibly healthy and happy that I truly believe they had some kind of symbiotic relationship going. It was kind of strange, but she destroyed it and it loved it. So if you have a cat, this will keep them amused for hours and don't worry about the plant. Another beautiful plant with an unfortunate name, bug loss. Who names these people? I want to know who gives them their names. This particular one here is called frosted glass. It's got the beautiful white etching in the leaves. Gets these beautiful little ephemeral flowers that just kind of float on top in the spring. Now you can get different leaf patterns. Also, you can get with a creamy, almost a yellowy creamed edge. You can get ones that have more white, ones that have more green, but you can play around a bit with the pattern leaves and a beautiful clump forming plant with these gorgeous little flowers. Great for the shade. You know Bergini was going to show up. This is just an absolute no-brainer. A beautiful, tough plant that does well in our environment. It's actually an evergreen, comes back early in the spring, pops up with these beautiful, bright pink flowers, really hard to kill, will spread in nicely and fill nice clumps, will fill in faces for you. A beautiful plant, those nice, big, strong green leaves. This is just a no, this works so well. Again, with the bad names, Budbane, beautiful plant. Beautiful purplish green foliage really does pop in the shade. The only thing is you want to get something behind it that is lighter. So that makes it really pop out for you. Otherwise, if you just have dark on dark on dark, things disappear for you. So using this in the shade can really make things pop, give a lot of texture. We get these beautiful purple flowers on tall spikes. And to some people, including myself, I swear they smell like grape Kool-Aid. Not everyone smells it, but people do. Now, coral bells have got to be a staple in most everyone's gardens. They're a great plant. They're easy to grow. They can be very drought tolerant, so they, can get through those dry times. Most people don't grow the old-fashioned, boring, green-leaved ones. I do. Because what I love about the coral bells is the beautiful stalks of flowers that pop up on top. That's actually what I'm growing them for, is the flowers. And I like getting clumps and I like tucking them in amongst other flowers so these beautiful bells can come up and wave around. What most people do like is to grow them for their foliage. And you can get a wide variety of foliage in coral bells. You can have a lot of fun playing with them. You get variegated purples and greens. You can get reds. There's oranges. Just an incredible display of colorful leaves. So you can have a lot of fun playing around with your coral bells here. One of my favorite shade plants is the masterwort. This is Ruby Wedding. It's a red. There's also a white, and there's a really beautiful pink one called Sparkle. And there's a prolific bloomer, beautiful flowers that come up on a stalk. It will seed a little bit. It's not what I would call really a problem child, but it will fill in and you can get a bit more. Doesn't require a lot of care. Very easy peasy plant to actually grow and gives you a beautiful burst of color with lots of flowers. Yellow loosestrife. Now, people usually hear the word loosestrife and they get a little nervous. Yes, purple loosestrife is an invasive weed. However, this is yellow loosestrife and it's a different plant. It is not an invasive weed. This one here is Alexander and it's got the variegated leaf, the beautiful yellow flowers on the stalk. This really picks up. You can see here we're in a planting. We got lots of, beautiful dark green leaves around it, and it just makes it really pop up and noticeable. And it's great addition just to give that little bit of oomph to your garden. Super easy to grow. A number of years ago, I did a poll amongst my friends, and I asked them for the top 10 plants that their top 10 plants that gave them the least amount of grief and the most production, give them the most bang for their buck. Every single one picks their yellow loose stripe. So it just kind of tells you how popular this is and how easy it is to grow. These are Solomon seals, those lovely bells that dangle off. This is the giant ones. They're beautiful. Got that grace arch into them, the yellow leaves, the white bells. If you want to go native, this is our Solomon seal. It's called the star flower and it's smaller. This is great for a shady area. They will shady to part shade. They will run around and fill in that space, but they're great. They're really quite cute. They got the sweetest little flowers, and this is our native version. This is an alpine clematis. This is Blue Boy. You can also get Ruby, which is a pinky red. I love this clematis. It will pretty much grow anywhere, anytime. Um, it will grow in shade. It will grow in sun. It gets these beautiful little nodding flowers in the late spring, early summer. And it's also a clematis that you only prune, you don't cut down. You only prune to shape. This is not your big flower clematis that you cut down every spring or fall. If you do that to this one too many times, you'll have to kill it. Does not like that. You can prune it, but do not cut it down. But it gets prolific flowers on it. It's great. It takes a bit to establish. I always say this is a 3-year plant. It takes the first year to think about it, the second year to contemplate it, and the third year to actually start growing. But once it gets going, it takes off and it's a beautiful vine. I want to talk a bit about ground covers. A lot of your shade plants are forest plants. They come from the forest floor. And forest floors are a bit on the damp, humid side, right? So we want to keep moisture in these areas. The best way for us to do that is to mulch. And one of the greatest ways to do that is with a green mulch, okay? So I want to talk a little bit about ground cover for the shade, keeping our moisture in the shade, keeping the wind. In the shade, we generally don't have to worry about the sun cooking out our moisture. It's more the wind, and this is where our ground covers really shine. This is Creeping Jenny. I use this a lot at my place in Calgary. I had it front and back. I just filled in areas and it was great. It gets a little yellow flower like a daisy. It gets a 4-petal yellow flower, and it's bright and sweet. And it comes in a regular green, which you see here, and I call a medium green. And there is also a yellow green, sort of a chartreuse version that you can also get. Great ground cover. Sweet woodruff. I also grew this. Love the leaf, that little tiny star flower. Found it absolutely so sweet. Uh, Sweet woodruff was what we used before we invented Febreze. You go out and you pick a few stems of this and put it in your house. You're not going to smell a fragrance, but when you walk in, what you're going to notice is a freshness. This was a very popular for potpourri and would go in people's lingerie drawers and just to freshen things up. Like I said, if you put this, pick some and bring in your house, you are going to notice a nice freshness to it. Periwinkle is a very popular vine. It is a ground cover, but it runs around as a vine, gets little blue or purple flowers. This is also a very good drought tolerant and will actually do well for you in dry shade, which not, it's hard for dry shade. So this is a good one for dry shade and it will fill in very nicely for you. And again, sweet little flowers. One of my favorites, this is the bunchberry. And you may be able to tell from Cantonensis, this is a native. If anybody speaks Latin, I apologize anytime I attempt it, all right? Wooden tongue syndrome when it comes to Latin. But it's important to know it, because that's how you know what you're buying. But no one said you had to say it. So, beautiful leaves. You can see this lovely little flower in the moment. This is also called ground dogwood. It has a lot of different terms. This is it in bloom in the spring. In summer, they get bright red berries. So you have this beautiful green foliage with all these little pinprints of bright red popping up in it. It's really quite sweet in the garden. Makes a beautiful ground cover and beautiful to look at. This is a juga. My favorite Latin term of all times, a juga. It's just fun to say. You gotta admit it. Come on. One thing I like about Ajuga is it comes in different colors. What you're looking at here is black scallop. It's a dark purple. There's also chocolate chip, another dark purple. Don't do really well in Calgary. There are some green, lighter green leaved ones, some with whites and pinks in with them. I do just find that the purple ones have a tendency to be a little tougher in our climate, but try and see what you've got going on at your place. Beautiful ground cover. Again, in the spring, we get a beautiful stalk coming up with a bright blue periwinkle flower on it. Quite stunning. And then it fills in nicely around. I love it. The shiny purple in these leaves. This is one of my favorite ground covers. I'm going to try and pronounce this. I just call it firecracker. This is an interesting ground cover in the fact that it's a bit on the taller side. Most ground covers do hug the ground, where this is, gets 12, maybe 14 inches tall. But if you've got an area where you want to fill in with something interesting, this is the way to go. You can see we get this deep purple, red in the leaf, little yellow flowers. Gives a real pop of color and brings in an interesting texture. Intermingle it with some other plants, and we really get some interesting things happening here visually. Here we go into the shade. Now, not a whole lot grows in the shade, but you can always count on ferns. I just wanted to point out that in the front here, the two ferns sitting uh, on the step there, those are actually Boston ferns out for the summer, okay? Those are not actual garden ferns that we're going to grow here. They came from the living room. But the other ones there are what we call ostrich ferns. This is also the fiddlehead fern. They are native to Manitoba, but have been moving west. I have seen them in the wild out here hiking. Plants move around, but they are absolutely a gem in the garden. They'll travel around and just find empty spots and fill them in. They're graceful, they're arching, they're beautiful. Love the ferns. On my right is what we have a Japanese fern with that beautiful silver red purple. Great texture, really adds a pop to the garden. Want to break up those greens, get things going with interest. This is Ligularia rocket. I am particularly fond of this plant. Behind my house in Calgary, I had a hedge. Now, my house, I was on the north side. So on the north side of my house, I literally had a hedge. They got 2 hours of light a day, and the bird or the butterflies and the bees absolutely adore this plant. You can see the rocket gets tall spikes of yellow flowers. There's also a ligularia that gets a large daisy-shaped flower. I love the rocket though because it is absolutely the pollinators just favorite. You see, I've got butterflies and bees on both of these ones, but also they have really interesting foliage. You can see this is behind my house. I got the whole bunch of them. And I was actually started buying them for their different foliage to make things quite interesting. So you can get some jagged edge and then you get this real fern-like deep cut. So they keep their interest. They provide quite a bit. And like I said, pollinators absolutely adore this plant. Lily of the Valley. Now I know some of us have cursed this plant because it spreads by rhizome and it can be rather difficult to remove if you have to do that. However, if you've got that shady spot that you just having a hard time with, try Lily of the Valley, okay? It will fill in. If you can contain it to that spot, that would be great because it'll fill in, it'll bloom those wonderful little bell-like flowers. There's also a new hybrid on the market with pink flowers, so sweet. Now, there's a bit of a controversy. Some people say, well, it's native. Other people say, no, it isn't. And they're both right. Lily of the Valley is native to eastern North America, like the Appalachian Mountains, maybe up into Quebec a bit. And it's also native to Eastern Europe. So we have it in both places. But this is native to eastern Canada around the Quebec area down into the mountains, the Appalachians. So that argument I'll solve right now. Everybody's ranked. You like those ones, right? Now, when we get into deep shade, that's a toughie. It's just really a toughie. But one thing we have found that will work for us there is good old lamium. I love lamium. It has the unfortunate name of dead nettle sometimes. I'm not sure where that came from, but it is a great plant for getting into really shady areas. You can get all different types of leaf texture going. There's always a little bit of silver involved, whether it be more or less, and then you get these wonderful little purple or sometimes blue flowers on them. So this is a great plant. It's a ground cover. It does spread, which is why sometimes we curse it because it can get away, but it's not too terrible. But I've also seen this actually mug out larger plants. I've seen it take out junipers. It just slowly grows up and over them and smothers them. So you do have to keep an eye on it. It can be a bit of a bully. Now, this is a plant I have always wanted to try. I had to go to Wikipedia to get the pictures because I haven't been able to get my hands on it to plant it yet, but it's on my list. And then I'll show you pictures from my place. And what it is, it's the bloodroot. These beautiful forest floor covering here, get these beautiful little flowers, and it just fills this wonderful carpet. I love this plant. As I said, it's on my list. I do want to try it, and it's something that will tolerate that deep shade. Now, dappled light. Again, I'm talking about the light that's under your deciduous trees. One of the great things to plant under deciduous trees is bulbs. Bulbs come very early in the spring, such as primulus, right? This is a beautiful plant. It is going to be up and blooming before your tree even thinks about getting a leaf. Then, when they're done blooming and they go back, they want to go into the shade. So it works out well. They bloom before the leaves and they're all done. They want to go in the shade. The leaves come out and they shade them. It's a great plant for that. Then you just end up with this lovely green around the bottom of your tree. So primulas are great for that. Also, hydrangeas. Hydrangeas like living under dappled light. It's a little softer. It's not so harsh. They do very well under it. Remember, this is light that is, we also call it filtered light because it's coming through the branches. Nothing's getting terribly burnt. I have seen hydrangeas get sunburnt. The big flowers is Annabelle with the big white balls. They can get sunburnt if they get a little short of water. So, also bleeding hearts. Now, I particularly love this one because this is the golden bleeding heart. And it really has got those beautiful chartreuse green leaves. They really pop up in the shade. Now, I just wanted to take a quick moment and talk about variegated foliage. You're going to see a lot of variegated foliage. I showed you pictures myself of shade plants. And you can get the variegated whites and the variegated yellows as we see in these two plants here. Now you have to remember where you see the variegated in the yellow, it has a lot less ability to pull energy out of the light because there's a lot less chlorophyll. When we get into the white areas, like we see with our Jacob's ladder here, it's missing completely. So these plants have less of ability to take energy from the sun to use in their growth. What you want to do is you want to try and make sure you bring them forward so that they're getting a little bit more light. If you can possibly do that, you'll find they will do better. I can tell you personally, the Jacob's ladder you see here on the right, that is mine, and I planted it with my other Jacob's ladders, and it was doing poorly. Just wasn't growing very well for me. It was kind of humdrum. And so I pulled it out to the front up with, as you see there, it's with the coral bells, and it popped right off. It was just getting a little bit more light and it just took right off. It was so much happier on that. So just a note about when you see variegated foliage, remember that it has to use that green to get chlorophyll. Now, I wanted to talk briefly about shrubs. I know this is supposed to be perennials, but we're using a lot of shrubbery in our garden space. And they're a great addition to having shrubs and flowers together for a lot of reasons. But what we are looking at here is this is the native Sambuca. This is growing on our farm. As you see, it will grow almost anywhere. It's growing inside of an old building, and it doesn't get a lot of light, but it's doing very well. What we really love to see in the garden is the hybrids office. These sambucas, the black lace and the lemon lace. These are incredibly exotic looking plants. They're super hardy. They do very well here, and they add an incredible pop to our garden, not only in color but in texture. People often use these quite a bit if they're trying to create a Japanese theme in their garden, just because of that gorgeous texture they have going on. And they're not huge shrubs, and you can also keep them pruned to the desired height you want. Some people are really trying to find an evergreen to go in a shady area. It's hard. The Siberian cypress is what we found does the very best in a part shaded area. Does need some sun, but it is the one that does the very best. Calgary carpet juniper is not bad. Buffalo juniper is not bad. Siberian cypress, though, is probably the toughest when it comes to the part shade area. Otherwise, junipers do want full sun. But this one does grow very well, and it fills out. It grows just like a juniper, that same evergreen carpet. One of my absolute favorites is this Turkestan burning bush. This is a very light, fluid shrub. It's got thin stems, long, thin leaves. It's very graceful. It moves in the wind. It's like it dances. It has pink little leaf-like flowers that dangle from it. It is a beautiful little shrub. It adds a really interesting texture to your garden. This is something you may want to plant along your back borders just to give you that little bit of background with still some good interest. Now, the mock orange can be very large. This is a native plant. It comes from Waterton. Hence, when you go to the nurseries, you're going to see the Waterton mock orange. That is a very large shrub, can get 8 to 12 feet tall. This is Snowbell, and this is a hybrid developed in 67 at the Canadian Agriculture Station. We have here a double bloom. We have a 4-foot shrub. Stays in a nice, usually grows a nice compact ball, and it has the most incredible fragrance. We call it mock orange for a reason. It smells like orange blossoms. And I always recommend if you've got a part shady area by where you sit or where you go in and out of your house, plant one of these near that when you can walk through and smell that beautiful orange blossom smell. It's incredible. Also, beautiful little flower, and Snowbell is known for being a prolific bloomer, hence the photo. And I grew that. One of my favorites is Glow Girl. This is a spirea. You will find a good number of spireas actually do well in part shade, and they are low-growing shrubs. Now, one thing I love about Glow Girl is that she is a very small shrub. She only gets about 18 to 24 inches high, and she gets wide, though she will get wider as she gets older, but she stays very short. In the summer, she's got this bright chartreuse leaf, and then in the fall, she goes through a number of different changes, ending up with this beautiful deep plum foliage. Absolutely stunning. So gorgeous fall color. We get a bloom in the spring, bright chartreuse, and then it slowly fades into this gorgeous plum in fall. They said most all the spireas, check the tags, but most of them are good in part shade. I'm always asked, what do you grow in the shade under spruce trees? My standard smartass answer is art. You are in an incredible difficulty area. The tree itself is a bully. It's pulling all moisture and nutrients from the soil. It's got an incredible mat, a web of roots. It's dominant. Also, when you get under a spruce tree, it's very hot. It'll always be warmer under a spruce tree. So it's a hard environment. So these are my suggestions. Art, a patio is always nice, kind of cool, place off a bit, or control the environment by using large pots. This way, you're in control. The spruce tree is not stealing the nutrients or the moisture from your plants, and you can have some nice things growing under a spruce tree. But that is basically my recommendation for that. Now, I just wanted to put some pictures together and talk about putting it all together, right? When we're planting a shade garden, how do we get it all together? The one thing I love about shade plants is they generally figure it out for themselves. One of my favorite gardens is Mount Cuba in the States. And an interview with the woman that created this garden, they asked her how she laid it out. And she said, "Oh, I just planted the plants and let them figure it out on their own." Shade plants will do that. They'll fill in, they'll move around. So you can take any little corner, a little dark alleyway. I mean, this is between a house and a very high fence. It gets very little light. Yet we've turned it into this lovely little green oasis that you look down, right? This is beautiful at the end here. Before a dark, dull little corner. And we still have tools. You might notice there is a wheelbarrow standing up down there. So we're still using it for our garden tools, but they're camouflaged. Looks like the garden. Planting all in together, they just kind of fill around and spill in. You can see here, we just got, get everything filling in around. This is actually fairly new. It has filled in some more. I need to get some more pictures. They just fill themselves in. Choose your larger plants, such as your shrubs, and then plant in some of your clumpers, like your bug loss, and then everything will just fill in around. That's what I love about shade gardens. They are lush. They are tranquil. They don't rely heavily on flowers and blooms and waving fancy colors around. You find a lot of blues and whites in their natural colors, some pinks, but these are often called tranquility gardens. If you want to go into a meditation garden or a shade garden, these are quiet gardens or peaceful gardens. Often you find the colors we use are quiet. Primary color in a shade garden, of course, is going to be green. Green is a cool color. Green is a quiet color. As you can see, we just let things fill in. If we add a little bit of water into this garden, we get that beautiful sound of running water. We also bring in water for pollinators. Pollinators need water too, food and water. So if we can provide water for them, that's going to be great. You're going to find a lot more pollinators coming into your space. They fill themselves in so nicely, though. They just work around. This garden is absolutely lush and beautiful. And it's not through heavy planting, it's through a bit of planting and a bit of time because they do it on their own. Again, you can see everybody's kind of moving in. I will admit, ferns sometimes can be a bit of a bully, particularly hostas, and you might have to call them back a bit, but you can see how they just fill in around each other. I love this. This is a garden on the edge of a wild space. And you can see we've just used shade plants to still bring some color and a bit of garden into our space, but to flow naturally out into this woodsy area. So we've got our ground covers, we got our ligularias, our ostrich ferns, and then we're going off into there. So it's a beautiful transition using our shade garden. So thank you very much. I wish you the very best gardening. This will pass what we see outside of our window, and it's just bringing us good moisture. So I would love to hear some questions. Thank you
I've got some
listening.
questions in the chat. So well, let's get to those first and then we can ask live questions. Someone asked about the wild cucumber and whether or not you can put it in a hanging plant.
No, I tried doing a hanging pot, and I just didn't have enough root space. And quite
Okay.
frankly, these get 14 to 20 feet tall.
Okay.
They will
Um,
go up. You don't need to hang them; they'll
yeah.
grow up there.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. What bulbs would you recommend for under a weeping birch tree or perennial plants?
All. All your spring bulbs because they are coming before that tree branches out or leaves out. I'm sorry. So Just don't maybe get anything that's late spring. But if you look at your tulips, they're going to say early, mid, late. I would stay with early and mid, but you could do uh, anything. Really, all the bulbs, all your spring bulbs would do great under birch. I wouldn't necessarily plant allium just because it's a bit on the messy side and it would get up in the birch tree.
Okay.
But then, you know what? I take that back. Dwarf alum would be fantastic. There's dwarf alum. Wouldn't be messy. But all
Around the
tulips,
catmint.
daffodils, yeah, pick them all.
Okay, around the catmint, whether or not it would attract cats from the neighborhood.
It
Is it
might
that?
cats, all my cat, now, not all cats love it. All
Yeah.
my cats adored it. If that's what you call absolutely thrashing it daily, yeah, it probably would.
When we were talking about the variegated leaves, someone was put the word chlorophyll in question mark, maybe just a definition of chlorophyll.
What chlorophyll is it is the substance in the leaf that turns sunlight into energy for the plant to use. That's how plants live. Our plants, I mean, there's other plants, other ways to use different, when you get into volcanic plants and things get funky, but they have to have that chlorophyll. So yeah, just remember when you're dealing with variegated, it doesn't have as much chlorophyll as a regular green leaf would.
We have another question about whether you should prune a spirea.
Oh yeah, prune them.
Okay, that's
I
good.
always cut off the flower blooms. I mean, when I worked in the nurseries, that's what we did. We were always pruning back the spent flower blooms. You shape them up. Obviously, it depends on the spirea you've got. Mine, I find they have a tendency to grow as a bit of a clump, so I leave them alone. But if you have something like magic carpet, which is kind of a ground cover in many ways, it really travels on the ground, you can prune it to keep it, behaving itself.
Then we have how and when do you control the bleeding hearts from taking over?
Well, in my personal case, I find when they reach the point of irritating me, I dig them up, chop off half the root, replant half of the root, and go give the other half to someone else.
Someone asked a question around how do you condition the soil around perennials? Example, manure, without smothering them.
Basically, you just want to go in and work in an inch of compost, right? And you can use one of those claws or just your hand, just work in about an inch around the top. You don't need a lot. I usually just go around with a cup and kind of make an inch, and then I just kind of whizzle it around and put it in. It's not that hard. One thing about growing ground covers as green mulch is they actually provide their own compost because as they drop leaf through, they're self-composting. That's really cool in so many ways.
Someone was asking about a tough plants for alleyways that people won't want to dig up later, and that might be drought tolerant.
Uh, if it's shady, go with Lily of the Valley.
Okay.
Or go with big root cranesbill geranium.
Okay.
That's another. Now, generally, people don't dig those up. People might actually donate them to you because they have a tendency to spread out, but they generally leave that. Or if you've got a bit more sun, maybe 4 or 5 hours of sun, irises.
Mm,
They will
okay.
fill that all in. They'll bloom so nice. And people rarely steal irises. They're usually trying to give them to people.
Someone was asking if you have any shade or part shade grasses.
There are a number that will grow quite nice for you. There's just so many grasses now on the market, it's hard to keep up with them all. But check your grasses. Blue oak grass, off the top of my head, does really well in part shade. I don't know of any that actually grow in shade very well, but part shade, there's a number. Some of the blood grasses,
Okay.
but there are a number of them that will grow quite nicely for you there. Yeah, and blue oak grass does really well.
A compact, non-spreading shade.
Well, there are a number of them. I mean, if you look at bug loss, it kind of grows as a big clump. It will fill out, but it will not spread. That's a really good one to grow in the shade. And loose strife, it will clump up, but it won't really spread out. I mean, they'll clump up into a larger plant. Loosestrife, the yellow loosestrife is really good for that. Also, hostas.
That's good.
Again, they'll clump up, but they don't spread. And I'm trying to think. A lot of them do spread, so I'm just thinking here for a second on this. Ligularia. Again, they will clump up and become a large plant, but will not spread.
Just a clarifying question. Dwarf allium under weeping birch. Did you say that was a good plant?
Yes, it is. There are a number of varieties of really sweet. Don't always think of allium as the big purple balls on that, because we have others. There is a very short one, grows about 6 inches tall, and it has fuchsia flowers, kind of a little flat panicle head with incredible fuchsia little flowers. My mom has it planted. I just adore the thing. And it gets about 6 inches tall. And she has it under her, well, it's in amongst the bulbs under her birch tree.
Someone asked, they said last fall they planted a Boston fern and had it in the container on the front porch at a shady spot in the backyard. I left it alone and now it looks like a messy, mushed clump. Will it rebound and is there anything I should do to it?
Boston ferns are actually very tricky. And what happened was it probably had a great time being outside, and then it got back in for the winter, and our houses are so dry. And that's one thing Boston ferns do not like is dry. So give it a good clip and let it go back outside for the summer and it will rebound. A good clip and a good feeding. And make sure it's, in a nice shady spot. You probably had it in a great spot last year, but they just do not like our dry houses. It's hard to get them to stay good.
All right, thank you. That was so helpful. Thank you so much. This is great.
Yes, thank you everyone. And spring is coming. Saturday's supposed to be great.